Are you ready to jumpstart your next big idea? Then welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. It's all about helping you find your niche, getting the motivation and strategies you need, and growing your ideas into something real.
Welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today we have a really great episode in store for you. We have Spencer Hawes on, and we are talking about Niche Site Project 4 and OwnTheYard.com. Now, it's been a while since we had an update on OwnTheYard.com. The site has been doing great. And so we dive into all the metrics about the site as it currently stands. And Spencer has some very exciting news to share as it relates to Own the Yard. So if you've been following along on the Niche Site Project, if you've been participating in all of the updates from the very beginning, back when the site was started in September of 2018, you're going to really enjoy what we go through today. We get into the numbers, the traffic, the strategies, the backlinks, all the different things that go into this site. And then we spend the second half of the podcast talking about where OwnTheYard.com is going now with some of the exciting news that Spencer shared. So let's go ahead and dive in and hear all about where Niche Site Project 4 is. Today's show is sponsored by Ahrefs, an all-in-one SEO toolset. Do you want more Google traffic to your website? Are you struggling to rank and not sure what to do about it? Is the idea of hiring an SEO agency outside of your budget? Well, there's a better way. It's called Ahrefs Webmaster Tools, and it's free. This amazing resource will audit your website and prioritize the needed changes you need to make to improve your search rankings. Imagine what you could achieve as more traffic starts to roll in. Beyond more leads and more sales, Ahrefs Webmaster Tools is going to help you analyze backlinks from other sites. It's going to help you find important people who are referencing your content. This could lead to future partnerships and collaborations. If the idea of getting Google to work for you sounds confusing, Ahrefs also has a good number of tutorials on search engine optimization. I personally have used many of them to help myself and my websites. Isn't it time that you started getting a little bit more search traffic? Visit ahrefs.com/webmaster-tools and get this free tool working for you today. We've included a link in the show notes, but again, that's ahrefs.com/webmaster-tools. Thanks again for sponsoring today's episode. All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we've got Spencer Hawes back in the house.
Yeah, Jared, it's good to be back. You know, last time we did this, we weren't sure who was going to host and kick it off, but you've clearly won that job. So I'm going to let you take it away, and I'm going to just pretend to be another guest on the show.
Pretend as you will, but today we're not just talking kind of open-ended. We've actually got a pretty focused agenda in front of us today. You know, last time it was real free-flowing. So let's just talk about where Niche Pursuits is and what's been happening in the life of Niche Pursuits, especially I think it was 2021, the year we were focusing on. Today we're talking OwnTheYard.com and Niche Project 4.
Right. And it's been a long time since I provided an update. I think it's been about 6 months.
Yeah, no, you're right. It has.
If I recall. And so I have a lot to share. A lot's been going on. And this will be perhaps the last update for Niche Site Project 4.
Oh, man. Okay. Now, well, you're coming out and saying it from the beginning. And I'm guessing that there's a reason that this might very well be the last Niche Site Project 4 update we gave. Maybe let's do a little bit of a history of the project and the website. And then I think I speak for everyone when I say the big burning question is, why will this be the last update?
Yeah. So Niche Site Project 4, I'll give like a 60-second summary here. The first article on OwnTheYard.com was published in September of 2018. And so I've done 4 public case studies where I built a niche site from scratch, where I do all the keyword research, share my entire process of finding a niche and building that website in front of everyone on my blog, the Facebook group, YouTube. And so that started really September 2018. And then the site started making some money. I think it was like 4 months later, and by the time it hit, I think it was 8 or 9 months. I was just looking at this. When it was about 8 or 9 months old, it hit about $500 a month in revenue and grew from there, right? Continued to grow. And the last update, and I shared monthly updates over the years, but that's been now just over 3 years, right? Since September 2018. I started publishing less frequent updates, really just because I wasn't doing anything new, right? I was just continuing to publish some articles. I had shared the entire strategy. And the last update that I shared, I believe, was the income for May of 2021. And the income was about $5,800 that month. And the income continued to do well. We can jump into that. But the big news here is that in September, I started looking at potentially selling Own the Yard. And I got some interested buyers, had a couple of people make really serious offers, and a deal to sell owntheyard.com did close the very first week of November of 2021. And so it has been sold. It's a done deal for over 2 months now. And so I'm finally revealing this for the first time. I am no longer the owner of Own the Yard.
And it is sold. You took a case study site, grew it, and just over 3 years later, sold the site. And so we'll get into the details. That's now that we've got that out of the way, we're gonna kind of dive into all the details of Own the Yard. I have to say, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I remember you posting something in the Niche Pursuits Facebook group at one point about how you were getting some interested offers. I guess before we go into all the details of the website, like, were you thinking of selling the site going into fall of 2020, or was it more something where it kind of came out of nowhere and then it caused you to consider the process of selling it?
I was always considering selling it. Okay. Even from day one of building the site, all my projects, I eventually have the goal to sell, and I know that. And so it's not so much a surprise that I was going to sell it, but when, right, was really just the unknown. And the site was about 3 years old. I felt like it was just time. Over the summer of 2021, I kind of felt like, I think it's about time. I've got other projects that I'm working on, and people can listen to actually the previous podcast and perhaps understand some of the reasons.
I was going to say that's got to give a lot of backstory there.
A lot of the backstory, just reducing my focus from lots of other projects. Own the Yard was a project that was not, I didn't want it to be my core focus going forward. And so that was a big reason. And so I put the feelers out, and what I did is I went to my team over at Motion Invest. People know that I'm a partner there at motioninvest.com. It's a brokerage for buying and selling websites. And I sort of told the couple other founders, hey, I'm looking at selling not one, but 2 of my sites. And would it be possible to sell these as a package deal and to do it privately? And so that's how it came about. I talked to them. They put kind of the word out on, they contacted some private buyers that they knew were buying bigger sites, because I had 2 sites together, and combined it's a large, purchase for sure. And that's when I started getting interested parties. And so I think it was September that I initially first started trying to get offers. And I did post in the Niche Pursuits Facebook group that I was getting some serious offers at that point.
So I'm always curious because, and like you said, we really talked about a big reason why you sold the site in the previous episode we did together. And a lot of people come into selling a site because they've hit a certain milestone in terms of revenue, or because they've owned it for a certain number of years and they're ready to move on to another project, or, so I was just curious to hear what it was. It really did come back down to putting your time and your efforts into other areas and other projects. And this was one of many things that you kind of, we'll call it, got off your plate.
Exactly. And I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, right? Like I'm a starter. I think there's lots of books that kind of talk about the idea person and the implementation person, right? I'm really good at getting projects off the ground for the first couple of years. And I just know my skill set of like, I tend to either lose interest or move on to other things, after a couple of years. And so
it dovetails really nicely with a podcast episode that we just had come out with Joe Valley about his book, The Exitpreneur's Mindset. And basically the whole interview was about, and his whole book is about building, in our case, your website from the beginning with the idea of selling, even if maybe you never will sell it. Maybe right now you're not thinking that way. Building it to sell is the best way to build it for now anyways, because it allows you to run a better business. So it kind of touches on a lot of the things you were talking about.
Yeah, I've read The Exitpreneur by Joe Valley. It's a great book. And I definitely resonate really well with the theme of that book of, just knowing from the start that you're going to be selling something.
Okay, so let's catch up to where you were over the summer of 2021, because the last update that had been published was in, I think, May, you said. I think May. And I have some of the numbers in front of me here. The site made $5,818 in May of 2021. So what did the site do for the rest of the summer? And the summer, by the way, this is a seasonal site, right? So the summer always does tend to be a big spike for Own the Yard. And I think looking back over some of the numbers from the previous reports, it looks like May, June, and then July are usually the highest earners anyways for the site. But maybe we can talk through like where the site was at over the summer of 2021 when you started to think about selling at earnings, traffic, number of articles, these kinds of topics.
Yeah, and feel free to dive in with what I miss or anything like that. I'm just pulling up my spreadsheets here. So May 2021, it made $5,800, $5,812, I think, or something. June, it made $7,683. July, $6,814. August, $5,873. And then, that's about when I was looking to sell the site at that point. But yeah,
that's I think anybody would be pretty happy with a site 3 years old, something that you were doing on the side, not your full-time, not something you were devoting your full time to, making $7,000, $8,000 at peak season.
Right.
What was what were some of the metrics behind that split? Was it mostly Amazon? I think it's predominantly more ad revenue focused, or at least around a 50-50 split, if I remember correctly, or close to that.
Right. Yeah. It really, a lot of the revenue is from ads, display ads, and looking at I'm just looking at like the last 6 months here. The total Amazon revenue over the last 6 months was just over $14,000, and Ezoic was almost $22,000.
Yeah.
So it's not quite 2/3 display ad revenue, but it's close. So it's a little over half, a little less than 2/3 of the revenue was from display ads. And it's kind of an interesting strategy because there's so many more informational based keywords that are easier to rank for than there are these product review type keywords that do really well on Amazon. And so I published a lot of content on the site. I have that number because I know people will ask.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask what the split was roughly, if you can, between informational versus, monetized or buying guides or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So there was a total number of articles of 656 articles that were published over that 3-year period. The rough split, I don't have an exact breakdown, but it's definitely more than 50% is informational articles. It may be as high as 2/3 by the end of the site. I actually started early on. The site was a lot more product focused, but the last year and a half or so, it was almost not all, but for sure the bulk was these informational keywords.
So I don't want to read into it too much, but if I were reading into that, it sounds like you really saw for some reason or some collection of reasons, like you grew into the idea of publishing informational articles as this site went on. It started off as really a true affiliate style site with affiliate earnings from, in this case, Amazon, and then grew into the additional components of monetizing through Ezoic with all this informational content.
Right. Yeah. Part of it is just not wanting to be as reliant on Amazon and their, commission changes and things like that. Right.
It wasn't all the squirrel content that was doing well.
That did pretty well, right?
I remember you talking about some squirrel, something about your squirrel content.
Yeah. I had quite the topical cluster of squirrels. Yeah, it was like, can squirrels eat chocolate?
Yes.
Can you eat squirrels that you kill in your backyard? Man, it was good stuff.
You never
know making money from that, right?
I was going to say, you never know the topics you're going to end up making money from.
Yeah, I love it. That's what keeps me coming back to like building new sites. Is like, that's an interesting niche I never thought about, right? So didn't know I was going to make so much money from squirrel content. But yeah, that was the reason. Try not to be quite as reliant on Amazon, like I said, and just that there are so many more opportunities for keywords, just traffic in general from informational keywords.
This is a bit of a deep dive on that topic, but while I have you on the topic, let me ask you: do you put ads on your buying guides? You put Ezoic on them.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I had tested out not having any ads, and then put ads on there, and I saw like no noticeable change in Amazon conversions.
That seems to be the going feedback. I rarely hear someone nowadays that has data to suggest that it would hurt their affiliate revenue to the degree of not making it worth the trade-off. So yeah, I was just curious there. Okay, so we had, mid 600s in terms of number of articles. At least a 50-50 split info to buying guides. I'm just reading some of my notes here too. Let's talk about the domain authority, if you will, and caveat, these are all third-party metrics, right? Whether we use Moz's DA, domain authority, or I think I always prefer Ahrefs, the DR, the domain rating, but I know that you had dabbled with some link building on this site. So maybe we can talk about domain rating, link building efforts, and just tackle that entire topic with On the Yard.
Yeah, and while you're talking, I'm trying to get into my Ahrefs to see what it is, because I actually forgot what the domain rating is. Let's see, 38.
38. Okay.
So it's a domain rating of 38, which is solid, for a niche site. I'm looking at Ahrefs here. It's got just shy of 20,000 backlinks total from 9,500 referring domains. So there's, it ranks for over 100,000 keywords. So yeah, I did some link building, right? I used a few different services. I think I talked about using Niche Website Builders and their Shotgun Skyscraper service. So I did do that. I did a little bit of other similar services like that, and some other just guest posting, right? That probably accounts for most of the links that were built, and then lots of other links just occurred naturally, right? Yeah. Like posting to Pinterest, right? A lot of those images ended up getting posted somewhere else and would link back to my site, things like that.
How big of a deal do you think, this is a very open-ended question, but how big of a deal do you think the link building campaigns you did with Niche Site Builders and a couple of the others, how much of an impact do you think they had on the site's, success, revenue, that sort of thing?
I think it's really important to have a base set of links. When you've got a brand new site, as much as I hate link building and I typically don't do a ton, honestly, you do have to get your site to a point where it has a certain amount of authority, and that comes through backlinks. And so I think they were important. So, over the first year, kind of getting this base set of backlinks is critical so that Google recognizes your site. But after that, like even now, like I really probably wouldn't do any more link building on my site. I'd just publish a ton of content, but that's just me. Right.
So we should all check back in 6 months and it'll be a DR56.
Right. We'll see what the new owner does.
Yeah, who knows? Well, we're going to get into talking about the details of the sale. If you don't mind though, I have maybe, I don't want to call it rapid fire questions, but just a bunch of questions about some of the details leading up to the site or throughout the site's build and then leading up to the sale, if you don't mind. I'm lucky because now that I'm sitting here and I get to ask the questions, like I watched this project start from the very beginning. I remember listening in on the call or on the podcast episode when you first launched it and then getting to see the updates. So I feel like I, along with probably a lot of the other listeners, have really watched this site grow, especially after you kind of revealed the domain or the URL to everyone. It's a big deal. Not everyone does that in their case studies. And there's just something about being able to go and look at the site that you're referencing and talking about. That's a big deal. But there's some questions I wanted to ask along the way. So I jotted them down. Let's dive into them. So you already teased it a bit. How big of a role did Pinterest play on this site? And the reason I really want to ask now is because Pinterest is really changing and evolving quickly for SEOs. And do you think you kind of caught lightning in a bottle? Do you think that is it still doing as well on Pinterest? Is that as viable of a strategy? So Pinterest in general, what kind of role do you think it played for this site?
Yeah, Pinterest was a big role. I put a lot of effort into regularly pinning images and building that up. I think it led to a decent amount of traffic, and I was just going to try to pull up the analytics, which I still have access to, thankfully. Social traffic accounts now for, at least in the last 30 days, only about 20%. So almost 80% is still organic or other sources. So while it hasn't attributed to like more than half, right, or anything, I think earlier it was probably close to 25 or 30% of the traffic. It has led to, I think, a lot of other links or mentions on websites, right, that has helped with the site. So, and certainly early on, Pinterest was a much bigger percentage.
Okay, was it?
Yeah, because like
traffic
in the first
a lot quicker from it.
Yeah, you can get a lot more traffic quicker. Google can take 6 months or a year to fully rank your articles. And so early on, Pinterest was very important. And then along the way, in the last year and a half, there's been a lot of updates to Pinterest where the traffic isn't as great from Pinterest. It's still, 20% of the traffic, but it wasn't as good as it was.
Fair enough. Let's see. Okay, so here's a question I had. As I was preparing for today and looking back through some of the old updates, because you were doing monthly updates in the first year, and my sentiment was that this site was taking a while to get going. And as I read back through some of the updates, that seemed to be your sentiment as well. When we talked about the numbers just now, though, it was earning well over $1,000 a month after 9-10 months, which isn't too bad. So my question was, why do you think this site took so long to get going? Yet at the same time, I'm wondering if that's even as relevant of a question now that we share those numbers. I think $1,000 a month, 9 to 12 months in, is pretty average to good right now. But anyways, so I'll ask the original question, but with the caveat that as we've talked already today, maybe it didn't take so long to get going and we were just kind of caught up in the emotions in the beginning. I don't know.
Right. I think I certainly was nervous, right? Like here I am, I published a site for the whole world to see. Many thousands of people are looking at this thing. Well, they're just seeing my numbers at this point.
They'll see it eventually.
It's zero.
Yep.
Zero. That's like 3-4 months in a row. I'm like, nobody's going to believe I know what I'm doing anymore. Right. So a lot of it was probably me projecting on everyone else. Like it's been 6 months and I've made, yes, after 4 months, it started making money, but it made $23.
Not much. Yeah.
And then it went down in January 2019 to $6. And then it made $15, right? And so it was. Yeah,
that's true.
So it did feel like, in the first 6 months, it was still like it had made less than $50 total. But then in March of 2019, it hit $128. And this is finally the peak, right? All these zeros and low numbers were also during the winter, right? And so it finally hit like springtime. Okay, April, it made $565. And then the first May, it made $740. And then you're right. By June 2019, it hit $1,000 and basically stayed above that almost the entire time. And so part of it was, it takes 6 months. It really does, for Google to fully index and sort of, process your site. And so I think it was both, that it takes 6 months, but I don't think it took this site any longer than anybody building a new site should probably expect about the same.
And that's really what I wanted to get at, and why I was like, no, I'm going to ask the question, because I mean, I don't think it matters if you've been doing this for 20 years or 20 days. The wait for a site to take off, you can tell yourself as much as you want that it's going to take 6 to 9 months. But man, when you're sitting at month 6, it doesn't matter how much it's still so demoralizing to wait. It just doesn't matter how many times you've done it. It's like the ad revenue drop off in RPMs when the year ends and it starts a new year in Q1. You can know that your RPM is going to drop off, but every year it just punches me in the gut. Doesn't matter if I knew it. So it's kind of funny, but I really wanted to talk about it because it's so true. Like, this one felt like it took so long to get going. I remember thinking that in the first year. You echoed it in a lot of your updates. Mm-hmm. And then here we have, actually, it was doing about what we thought a good site should do after a year.
Right. Exactly. And again, it's just like, I'm over here crossing my fingers, like, please, like, this is going to work. Right. But I continued to publish content and just doing the things that I knew should be done. And yeah, it worked. And, here I am. When I sold the site, it was averaging, I don't think we specifically said, but it was averaging like just over $6,000 a month the last like 6 months. Right. And so, which is a great site.
That's a great site. Yeah. I'm looking here. It looks like you're about, the 12th month was about between, I don't know if the 12th month is August or September, depends on which one you count as the 12th full month, but you're making $1,392 after, 11, 12 months. You had about 165 articles live on the site. I think that's also a good benchmark to bring up. How many articles did you have live on the site? You ended up getting that to over I think you said like 650. So yep. First year was about 164 articles. And then the last couple of years, you've ramped up the amount of content that was getting published.
Right.
Let me ask you about the things you think, because you've built a lot of sites now over the years. And specifically with this site, with ontheyard.com, what really worked? What do you think were kind of its biggest accomplishments as a website? What worked well from this site, compared to maybe other sites you've built?
Mm-hmm. A lot of it was the content strategy, really diving deep into sometimes these more obscure topics and finding just really unique and low competition keywords like that. That really was a big part of it, and consistently publishing and maybe what would be considered a lot of content.
Yeah.
From a lot of people, 650 articles. I know some people think of that like this massive site. It depends on who you talk to. It might be a tiny site. It might be a massive site. Right. But, so publishing, 200 articles a year, like that, yeah, which equates to, somebody can do the math, 20 articles a month or whatever.
Yep.
That was a big part of it. Just taking a lot of at-bats, just getting content out there for a lot of keywords. That was a big part of it. And then when I found that it ranked for a particular niche like squirrels, doubling down on that. Right. So I ended up with, more than 20 articles, I think, on squirrels. Another one was tree stumps, I think. And actually, and so I saw that like squirrels was doing good. So I moved to like other things that you could feed in your backyard, basically, like other animals, right? Just deer, right? Or, raccoons that are in and up in your backyard or whatever. Right. So I think that was a big part of it, is like when I found something that worked, doubling down on that type of content.
How much are you pivoting when you're watching the site grow? Are you keyword planning 6 months in advance and you just stick to that and that's how it goes? Or are you kind of just going a couple weeks at a time and then saying, okay, where's my traffic? Oh, look at that. Like, man, stumps are in. Let's just go all in on stumps now. Stop the writing on the other stuff. And just, how are you measuring that?
Yeah, I usually would call it batches of like 50 articles at a time, which would take a couple of months, right? 2 or 3 months, depending on right? And so every 2 to 3 months is really when I would reanalyze, and I'd go back to the stats and say what content is performing well, what's not. My initial thought on the site, and it worked out to some degree, it was more of a backyard games and activities site. Like that was the whole, and it still kind of is, right? Like playing croquet and frisbee golf and dozens of games, right? That was my first pillar article, as I wrote, I don't remember, 100 plus games you can play in your backyard. And that did work, but then I certainly pivoted when I talked about these other, animals and things like that. I would double down on that type of content.
We've had a number of people on the podcast in the last, I'll call it 6 months or so, that talk about, hey, you got a buying guide on croquet, or whatever, croquet in the backyard, write some informational articles about croquet, point them up towards either your buying guide, build a little bit of a topical authority or a bit of a topical silo on that. I'm paraphrasing what people have said. I know Kyle Roof went into great detail on it. We've had a number of other people talking about how they build topical authority. Were you going after just low-hanging fruit or low competition keywords that fit the backyard space? Or were you really trying to kind of build little topical authority? I'm going to write about the croquet. I'll write my buying guide. Let's do a couple informational articles about playing croquet, and kind of hopping around there.
I definitely was trying to build that topical authority, right? So you gave a great example. I do have several articles on croquet.
Oh,
right?
sorry. Just guessing.
Yep. So I would try to
Easter tradition in the Bauman family. We play croquet in the backyard. So
nice. That's a good Easter tradition.
My dad always wins. I think no one's ever beaten him. Maybe once.
Well, maybe read some articles on the Yard and pick up a skill.
Brush up. I could show up and say I feel prepared this year.
That's right. Maybe they'll get something there that you didn't know about.
But sorry, I cut you off. So croquet, yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely did that topical authority type thing, but then also took some other at-bats, right? Just finding other low competition keywords along the way to spread the topics and the coverage of the site, and then would double down on those if I saw something, doing well. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. I know on my website that I my, niche site I run on the side or whatever, I feel like I've been so indoctrinated to go after low competition keywords. And that's my primary strategy. I feel like that's also your primary strategy. But sometimes I have gotten so caught up that I won't even take an at bat at a bigger topic, and I've been encouraged to take a few at bats at those. And I've actually had a couple of those bigger keywords, those bigger ideas work well. So it's a good reminder, it's a good reminder to take some at bats, even when it might be a little bit of a reach. So yeah, let's talk about what didn't work on this site. If you could, what didn't work when it comes to Own the Yard? Something you tried, something you thought would work, something that you thought maybe would monetize better. Maybe you tried an email list and it never went anywhere. Like, what didn't work on this site?
Boy, there probably are lots of things. And I know if I had reread all my updates, there are tons.
Maybe you've pushed those out of your mind now because
I forget the bad stuff. I did try to build an email list, and that didn't really go anywhere. Part of it was I know how much work it is actually to have a good email list. Mm-hmm. And so I just felt like, that's probably not. I actually did some paid ads just to see what happened to get people on an email list, get them over to the site. And that really didn't go anywhere. I'm trying to think of anything SEO wise that didn't work. I mean, boy, I'm pretty sure I did a whole update on essentially penalties that happened.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because it looks like it did get knocked at least once in an algorithm update.
Yep. I think I did a whole podcast on it. So maybe we can link to that, but
try to find that. Yeah.
Just basically, Google updates for whatever reason, it didn't ended up being any links that I built, but I hired somebody to clean up, do a link audit.
You actually got a penalty on this site, didn't you?
There was a penalty on the site.
Right. It wasn't just an algorithm update. It was a penalty. It was
a penalty in Google Search Console. Got somebody to clean up all the links. And I don't remember how many months later, 2-3 months later, that penalty was lifted and traffic started to go back up again.
I had totally forgotten about that. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Whatever, I don't know what I did still to get that penalty, but that was certainly something that didn't go well that I had to fix.
Well, I don't remember the timing of it, but could it also be just the downside risk or just the risk of doing a public case study site?
Sure. Yeah. There
Maybe.
are people out there that who knows if they built a bunch of links or whatever.
Yeah.
But
That's a good point. Yeah. I remember you mentioned the email list. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people do think an email list is a great add-on, but it's a lot of work.
It is.
At our agency, we do email marketing for a lot of companies, and the reason they hire it out is because it's so much work. It's just a lot of work to manage an effective and well engaged email list.
It is. To do it right, you really have to have somebody focused on it, knows how to write, knows how to make offers, knows how to get people to your website. It sounds really easy, but you have to be pretty skilled at it to do it right.
Let me ask you about this niche site project, which this one's niche site project 4. And I mean, we kind of get a little walk down memory lane here, but I mean, looking back at some of your original niche site projects compared to this one, I mean, what's changed about website building in terms of Own the Yard? And I know we could fill an entire podcast about that, but just, a little, I think it'd be fun with all the niche site projects that you've done over the years to kind of just look back at some of the ones and what used to work versus what really, I mean, you kind of already outlined what worked here. Low competition keywords around topical authority, around, a real brandable domain that you grew over the course of 3 to 4 years, that took a year before it was 6 months before it was even making $1, a year before it was really making anything worth, writing home about. How different is that compared to some of the earlier niche site projects?
Man, taking a look back, it's been about 10 years since I started doing these niche site projects. Niche site project 1, I think, was 2012, maybe it was 2013. So 10 years, so that's a lot of my life.
You don't need to get nostalgic necessarily. I'm not trying to make
too late. But a lot has changed. When I first started, exact match domains were the way to go. And it was really quick. I don't know how fast niche site project 1 started making money, but within a couple of months, I think I was like almost ranking number, at the top of Google, with, for my target keyword, best survival knife, was my first keyword I targeted. So that was a big part of it. Exact match domains, ranking quickly. You could get away with building spammier links, if you will. So the link building was like, I just would hire somebody and they'd, build, I don't even know where they would build links, right?
Just spit out some links and that was that.
So it's changed a lot, over the years. It's slowly progressed, 2, 3, 4, to more quality, to more content. I went from, I think first niche site project had maybe 20 articles, 25, maybe.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was like, that was it. Like I was, covered everything, to, 650 articles. And so there's been a lot of changes along the way, but SEO still works. At the core, it's still targeting low competition keywords. And, links are still important. All of those things are still at the core, but a lot of the tactics have definitely evolved. Yeah.
It's funny because I think out of all the things that have changed, exact match domains and backlinks and, time, sandbox, all these things, like low competition keywords at its core really hasn't changed.
Right. Yep. Still trying to figure out what, who's ranking at the first page of Google and can you beat them? Right. And the lower competition that is, the easier it is to beat them.
So let me throw you a fun question here. If Own the Yard had been your sole project and you didn't have anything else going on, which again, reference the last podcast for people to hear what is going on. But if Own the Yard had been your sole project, it was earning, $6,000 a month on average, and that was what you were focusing on exclusively, like what would you be doing going forward to grow it? And are there anything you would have done differently as you were building it if it had been your sole project?
Absolutely. If it truly was my sole project, I would have been much more of a hustle blogger. And I may have mentioned that phrase in our last interview. Basically, typically the way I approach these projects is I've got tons going on. And so I have to be almost a passive, person. I hire people to write all the content. I hire people to link build, and I don't do a ton of stuff because I don't have the time. If it was my sole project, I would have been a hustle blogger, meaning I would be reaching out, connecting with people in my niche. I'd be, swapping guest posts. I'd be trying to get featured in other publications. I'd maybe be starting a YouTube channel and actually filming me gardening or whatever.
With squirrels.
Catching and eating squirrels, I definitely would have been super hands-on and doing a lot of that. But at the core, I still would have also expanded the content a lot more, would have published more articles. That's kind of what I would have been doing for sure.
That's kind of what I was wondering if that would, I was wondering which way you'd go with that. And I think that's great advice for people who are listening. And, a lot of people aspire to make website building their full-time gig, and Own the Yard is a solid platform. Someone making $6,000-$7,000 a month, you can quit your full-time job doing that. And you can make a website at that point, your full-time interest and investment.
Right. And so, talking about, sort of full-time income, I thought it might be interesting to talk about the total amount of money that the site made over its life.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think I know listeners probably want to know how much I sold the site for. We can tap around that question here a little bit.
Spencer, it's good to just draw this out because it keeps people listening to the podcast.
That's true.
Keeps the engagement high. If you're watching on YouTube, those engagement metrics are really important.
That's right. If you've made it this far, we will get to that.
It's coming.
Stick around. And so maybe we'll jump into that here. But
no, I'm kidding. Let's talk about the sale and let's get to.
Okay.
I also, by the way, I didn't ask about the traffic the site was getting as we neared towards the sale here, because we talked about how much it was making. We talked about how many articles were on. We talked about a lot of the other metrics, but I did gloss over, and I'm looking back, about the traffic, which is a really important number for people listening as well.
Yeah. So if I'm looking back, the July, it's doing 120,000 sessions a month. Actually, let me go to sessions if I can. That's users. So 100 people on the edge of their seat, almost 150,000 sessions a month.
Okay.
And kind of going down after the peak, the summer is the peak. And then, kind of coming out of summer, it's still just a little over 100,000 sessions a month. That's so between 100 and 150,000 sessions a month, to give people an idea about when I was preparing to sell the site. Yeah. All
right. Well, I suppose we've talked details long enough. Let's talk about the sale, and let's talk about how you wrap this thing up in a nice, pretty bow, and Own the Yard is on to someone else.
Yeah. So maybe let me talk about, so total amount that the site made was, over the 3 years, almost $109,000 was the total revenue of the site. And I'm going to re-reference this. I kind of want to get a number of total amount I made after expenses, after the sale, and we can calculate that. So
I'm writing it down here. I can do the math.
Yeah. And so the total expenses on the site, and this is not perfect. I kept really good expenses for the first 18 months.
We had to report on it.
Yeah. And then, so it is right around 65,000. Most of that being for content, right? And then we can talk about the sale. I mean, so
you probably sold it for what, about a 10x multiple on monthly earnings? And I'm kidding.
Multiple, right?
Because this is 1995,
right?
No. Yeah, I think as much as you can share, obviously people love to hear numbers. Now, I think you mentioned earlier, and I'd be curious to hear how that played out. Did you end up selling multiple sites? You had mentioned when you went to Motion Invest and the team there that you actually had multiple sites for sale. So that could cause some complications if you'd sold them to the same person or whatnot. I know this happened in the past.
Yes. And so I did. I sold multiple sites. 2 sites were sold together as one. And There's a lot of reasons for that I guess maybe we don't need to get into, but I wanted it. It basically comes down to I'm trying to eliminate projects. So I decided, if I can sell them both at once, let's do it. And so I found one interested buyer, right? Both of the sites were similar in that display ads and Amazon were kind of the thing, right? And found a buyer for that, and sold them as a package deal. And as part of the sale, the new buyer did request that I don't share the total amount that the package was sold for. And both of the sites were valued a little bit differently because they brought different things to the table. The other site that I sold was actually a little over twice as large as Own the Yard. So it was a bigger site, had a much bigger Pinterest following, and just some other details related, to that make it a little more complicated to say, okay, Own the Yard was worth this. Right. Just because it was sold as a package, they didn't buy it individually. It was just, they bought everything. And there was a lot of things that went into the valuation. And they asked that I not share what that total valuation was. But what they did say I could share is that I've already shared the income numbers, right? That it was making roughly a little over $6,000 a month on average the last 6 months. The site did sell for over a 40x multiple. Without going, exactly what that multiple was, you could roughly say that Own the Yard sold, if it had sold on its own, would have sold for about $250,000.
That's exactly what at 40x and 6,000 ish, you're looking at somewhere around the 250 mark.
So again, if it had been sold on its own, that's roughly the range it would have been. Again, it didn't sell on its own, so this is all sort of conjecture, right? But certainly the total amount was paid, we can attribute, about $250,000.
Well, I did the math.
Yeah.
I did the math on it. You want to know the total?
Yes.
After expenses and your revenue while you own the site, plus the total sale price, you ended up at just shy of $300,000, $294,000 of profit on it.
Nice. So
for a public case study,
3 years. Yeah, for a public case study over about 3 years, that's just under $100,000 a year. Right? Which that's awesome. And
the $65K that you invested, I think it's important to kind of point out. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the $65K you invested was an investment you made over the course of 3 years. We already talked about how you actually ramped up the production of the content in years 2 and 3, not ramped down.
Right.
And so you spent $65,000. That's about a little over $20,000 a year, which is right around just a little under $2,000 a month. And so obviously for the first year, you were going into the red on that, but you were quickly catching up to that. I think that this is a pretty doable example for someone with a little bit of a budget or a little bit more time than you had.
Right.
This is a pretty good case study, start to finish, for someone who has a job and either has some weekends or evenings they can put towards it and then not spend quite as much as you did, or for people who have that budget and say, yeah, I can spend about $30,000 out of the gate and then start taking the profits from the site and reinvesting them.
Right. And, at the end of the day, that's really what I wanted to show with my niche site project. That's what I've always done, is I really wanted to be able to share that this is doable. And I wanted to do it in an open way, because I know when I was starting, I was always the same way, as like, yeah, I see these numbers you're posting about on your blog, but what's your site? Is it really, so I've done everything publicly. People can look at Ahrefs. They can, see the site, see exactly what I'm doing, and hopefully gain some confidence that, hey, this is real. People really can do this. And I haven't done anything magical, right? I published 650 articles over 3 years. It's not a cakewalk, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's a lot of content.
It's a lot of content, but I did outsource this, right? So I shouldn't say that, hey, I was writing all this content, but somebody can absolutely replicate that, right? Over a 3-year period, if they're willing to invest, $20,000 a year, or maybe even a little bit more, they can get some solid returns.
And $300,000, I mean, you've had some website exits before, but for someone who's selling a website for the first time, or I mean, that's definitely in the realm of life-changing kind of income. That's real. Or they could hold on to the site and keep growing it, or they could hold on to the site and maybe what we call cash flow it, right? Just kind of do a little back off on production of content, back off on the investment, and just kind of let it continue to churn out. And a site that's built on SEO primarily should continue to churn out profit for a good amount of time.
Right. It gives you options, right? A lot of people have talked about sort of the stair-step model of, maybe you build a niche site and at first you're hustling and you're investing a little bit of money, but after a couple of years, if you can exit, right, and all of a sudden you've got 6 figures in your savings account, you can stair step up to maybe a bigger project, right? Whether that's buying a site or investing more into a new site or starting a software company like I have done, right? You can stair step up to bigger projects instead of making, $5,000-$6,000 a month. You can double or triple that.
Maybe,
right.
Yep. So I already know the answer to this, but I know if I don't ask you this, then it's going to be in the comments below. When's Niche Site Project 5 come?
Ooh, the tough questions.
Look, it's going to be in the comments if I don't ask it. You know that.
Oh man, I don't want to disappoint people, but I guess I'm going to do that. I really don't think there will be a Niche Site Project 5. I really don't.
So this is this. I referenced the Spencer going away to the sunset in the last podcast, which you're not doing. But with Niche Site Project, this might be the farewell tour right here.
I think it might be. As great as the projects have been, they really have been in every regard, But it's just so much work. And caused me a lot of angst sometimes, right? I'm nervous about, is my site actually going to make some money? I've rolled the dice 4 times. I'm not sure I'm ready to roll the dice a 5th time, not because I don't believe it would work out, but for those reasons I've mentioned, right? Yeah. It's a lot of work. I'd like to focus my efforts on growing in other ways. My niche pursuits is at a point now, I don't know that I need to, or that it's going to make a huge impact on growing my audience even further. So, well,
plenty of players have come back out of retirement. Yeah. And just know that as those teams were quite excited to have those players come back, we would be quite excited if you ever change your mind. Don't worry, you don't have to have any remorse or regret. You can always bring back Niche Site Project 5 and we'd welcome it with open arms.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I will keep that in mind. Absolutely.
But this does feel like a pretty good farewell, I have to say. That was said pretty definitively. So
yeah, where I'm sitting right now, I have no, there's not a desire to do another one, and never say never, but I wouldn't expect it.
Fair play. This was a 3+ year project. Mm-hmm. That's when you're signing up for quite a project when you sign up to do something like this, especially with what we talked about earlier with how much longer it takes. The sandbox, indexing, ranking, how long it takes to build an authority style site that actually has substantial earnings to it. It's not just a 6-month commitment anymore.
Right. And I know that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And so if I feel like I don't want to put in that effort, it just doesn't make sense to start something that I'm going to do kind of halfway. And so that's
Any final thoughts? Any final thoughts on the yard? Any final thoughts on Niche Site Project 4, or really Niche Site Project in general?
What's really interesting, just looking over the years, like I said, it's been almost 10 years since I really started doing niche site projects, and Niche Site Project 4 being the last one, is that SEO still works. Like if you had asked me 10 years ago, like honestly, a part of me, even back then, and even part of me still today, is like, how long is this loophole of getting free traffic from Google going to last? But it's still here. So that's sort of the final thought, is like, I don't know how long Google is going to be around. I think 10 years ago, if you would have asked me, is, getting great traffic from Google going to be a thing in 10 years? I would have said maybe, but it probably won't, be as good. If you ask me that today, I'll probably give the same answer. Will it be around in 10 years? Well, maybe, but maybe it won't be quite as good. But I was proven wrong, and hopefully I'll continue to be proven wrong. But as it stands today, you can absolutely replicate what I just did with Niche Site Project 4. I see no reason why that's going to change over the next few years. Like I said, in 10 years, maybe we'll have some new advanced technology and we're all just thinking in our brains and get search results, and nobody's making any money because we're all in the metaverse. But where it is, today, you can replicate this, you can do this, the strategies and the skills required are all there. You can follow Niche Site Project 4. And also that's part of why I don't think I need to do Niche Site Project 5. I wouldn't change anything.
It'd just be a reboot. It'd just be a reboot.
Just go read every blog post and watch every video. If you're trying to learn, even what I published back in 2018, I wouldn't change anything. It's all the same.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I mean, certainly things about SEO are always changing, but the basics have remained fundamentally very constant for the last decade. And, barring some seismic shift, there's a good chance they'll remain pretty constant for a good little while. So if you're watching this in years to come, you've just gotten a nice cherry on top of what was a 3-year journey in a great strategy, and a strategy that works now. And, the bulk of it will probably continue to work for a good ongoing period of time. And I could flip the tables on you and argue that maybe SEO will be more prominent in 10 years.
Absolutely.
I don't want to get into a big topic about, but look at all the privacy concerns. Look at all the social media networks and how they're consolidating and how they're, not providing as much. There's so much that I could argue that says that maybe SEO will grow in the next 10 years. And to also be to that point, we know that the value of websites in general is going up. And there's no reason to believe that won't continue to go up as more and more dollars get poured into this space, especially from investors and from funds and stuff. So I could say there's never been a better time to be building a website.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't necessarily argue against that, right? Like it's just 10 years is a long time.
It's a long time, especially in this game.
It's a long time, right? We just don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
But I would strongly argue that in the next 3 to 5 years, we're not going to see significant changes. And I personally, when it comes down to it, where am I putting my money? I am absolutely doubling down on SEO and SEO strategies. I'm just doing it now for niche pursuits, as we talked about. I'm pouring a ton of money into SEO and growing that brand. And so I'm not saying that people shouldn't focus on that over the next 3 to 5 years. I honestly don't know what the world will be like in 10 years. Right. And then also when you look at Link Whisperer, I have a software tool that I'm investing money in. It's a growing industry. It's a great industry. I'm getting results. I know others are seeing results from that. And so that's kind of where I'm putting my money and my effort. I just, maybe something seismic will happen in 10 years that we just can't predict.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Well, it's a great way to sign off. It's a great way to put like I said, a cherry on top of Niche Site Project 4 and owntheyard.com. Best of luck to the new owner. And it's just been so fun to watch along in this now we're getting close to 3.5 year journey. And so well done. That's a great exit. It's a great way to, again, a public case study site, multiple 6 figures there. So congratulations. Well done. And thank you for sharing with all of us along the way, because I know I speak for a lot of people. There's nothing better as you learn your craft in this space to see an example site and then understand and hear the strategies that are going into that site. So thank you for sharing all that with us for the last many years.
Yeah, it is. It's been a lot of fun to share the journey with everyone. Thank you, Jared, for helping me recap this and ask the questions that I'm sure the audience wants to hear. And I do just want to say thank you directly to all the Niche Pursuits listeners and watchers and readers for following along and sort of putting your trust in me to kind of share what's been happening with Own the Yard and sharing the strategies that I've had both successes and failures. If you go back and read the blog post, there's certainly sort of failures along the way. And the one tip that I do like to always leave with people is that I wouldn't look to any one person, even myself, to try and copy exactly, right? Like, even though I would recommend you go back and read all the case study updates if you're trying to build a new site, try to follow the general strategies, like what's the general SEO principle or the keyword research principle that's being applied here. But don't get too caught in the weeds of like, would Spencer, have it this font, or, would he have his ad in this location, or, right? Like, nobody knows your site and your business better than you. And this goes for any business. Nobody knows it better than you. And so while you can take advice from sort of the gurus or the experts that are out there, you're going to probably find a better solution if you sit down and think about it a little bit for your particular unique situation. So that's the advice that I'd lead with people, is that, I hope you've gained a lot of value from Niche Site Project 4, but always be willing to try your own strategies or try something a little bit different to see even more growth and potential from your site.
That's great. That's great advice. That's great advice. We don't need to worry about whether Spencer says to go after squirrels or deer. Stay out of the weeds.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, no, but to close on that, I mean, there really is an entire course's worth of information if you backtrack through all of these. And like we said, it's at a strategic level, so applicable. It's all right here. And then use this along with your own intuition. Great advice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great chatting about it, Jared. And thank you everybody for listening. It's been great to share my thoughts again.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Spencer. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Ahrefs, today's show sponsor. And again, if you're looking for more Google traffic, if you're struggling to rank, you're not sure what to do about it, and the idea of hiring an SEO agency is just outside of your budget, they have a free tool. It's called the Ahrefs Webmaster Tools. It's an amazing resource. It's going to help you audit your website. It's going to prioritize the needed changes you need to make to improve your search rankings. Imagine what you could achieve as more traffic starts to come in. Beyond the leads and the sales, you're going to have Ahrefs Webmaster Tools helping you analyze your backlinks from other websites. They're going to help you find the important people that are referencing your content, can help lead to future partnerships, collaborations. You get the hint. The idea of getting Google to work for you sounds a bit too confusing. Ahrefs also offers a lot of helpful tutorials on search engine optimization. So the time is now. It's a free tool, and you can go grab it by visiting ahrefs.com/webmaster-tools. Again, that's ahrefs.com/webmaster-tools. We've included a link in the show notes. Thanks again to Ahrefs for sponsoring today's podcast.